Should be live.
Greetings, folks. It's great to see you here today for New Hampshire Peace Actions, Peace and Justice Conversation Series online for, let's see, what are we? November 18th, 2024. Tonight's topic is Working for Peace After the Elections with Kevin Martin. So for over 40 years, New Hampshire Peace Action has been educating, mobilizing, and organizing to build a more peaceful and just future for all. And in that spirit of respect, let's start off here with a land acknowledgement. And note that we are doing our work here in New Hampshire on Nidakina, the traditional ancestral homelands of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We honor with gratitude the land, the waterways, and those people who have been in relationship for so many generations. Quick reminder about our Zoom setup. We love when you have your video on, but your audio will be muted to start with at least. You can use the chat all along to get your questions in that we'll get to later. And I'll allow, folks to hand raise and I'll give you the unmute possibility at that point. So tonight we're really excited to welcome back Kevin Martin, President of Peace Action and Peace Action Education Fund, the national versions of New Hampshire Peace Action. A little bit about Kevin. He joined the Peace Action staff September 4th, 2001. Previously, he was Director of Project Abolition, a national organizing effort for nuclear disarmament. He spent 10 years as Executive Director of Illinois Peace Action. He also directed community outreach canvassing for Peace Action in DC before that. He's traveled around the world representing the U.S. peace movement. He's gone to Russia, Japan, China, Mexico, Britain, Germany, France, and other places I know. He's currently convening a national CeaseFire Now Grassroots Network focused on ending the genocide in Gaza. He's a really important friend and mentor to us here in New Hampshire, and we're really happy to have him join us again at another difficult and maybe kind of confusing moment in the world. So last time we met was pre-election, and now here we are back. And Kevin, thanks for being with us to talk about this particular moment. Join me with a visible welcome to Kevin.
Thank you, Amy, and thank you, friends, for being here tonight. I love the land acknowledgement. So I'm coming to you from Piscataway land, which just outside of Washington, D.C., Silver Spring, Maryland is the current name for it. I wanted to invite people to put in the chat, if you might, one word about the way you're feeling. And I actually did this for the first time at World Fellowship years back. And it was a similarly difficult time. And I find it helps if people can distill how they're feeling in one word. And I think it's okay to have that word change hour to hour, day to day, minute to minute. I feel resolute, but certainly there have been days where I didn't want to get out of bed since the election, or I felt distraught or dismayed, and I know a lot of other people are as well. And what's cool about this is you get to see, just different, and it's a snapshot, right? If we did this tomorrow, it could be different. You might have a different word. And maybe by the end of tonight's conversation, you'll have an entirely different word. Someone will have persuaded you that you can be more hopeful or more active or whatever it is. So I would say blessing that we have right now, if you want to call it that, is the resistance to Trump and his agenda is already started. So you may have seen from New Hampshire Peace Action or from National Peace Action or other organizations, probably this Wednesday, the House of Representatives will vote again on HR 9495. And the longer name of the bill is something about countering terrorism or whatever, but we're calling it the nonprofit killer because that is what it's intended to do. Now, we were able to stop it last week in the House, but that's because they tried a parliamentary trick to get it through on what's normally a non-controversial basis called the suspension calendar, and it needed 2/3 support to get through, and it didn't. But they're bringing it back under just normal rules, a normal vote, normal order, as they call it, and it's probably going to be voted on Wednesday. And it's redundant and unnecessary because terrorism is already illegal, and the government has the tools it needs to go after any organization that is funding or supporting terrorism. But what this would do, and this is intentionally to go after pro-Palestinian voices, and particularly, student groups who have been doing such an amazing job protesting the genocide in Gaza. And this bill would allow the Treasury Secretary, and I haven't checked who he didn't already nominate Elon Musk to be the Treasury Secretary, did he? I don't know, but it'll be somebody horrible. And it would allow the Treasury Secretary to go after nonprofits and revoke their nonprofit status. So the first targets may well be pro-Palestinian organizations, including all of ours. But we cannot let this happen. We think we can defeat the vote in the House. And I've been very pleased to see Lloyd Doggett, who's a congressperson from Texas, who he and his wife are actually longtime Peace Action supporters, has been reaching out to us and keeping us up to date on what's going on with this bill. And he actually supported it when it was in committee, but he had a change of heart after looking at it again, and also the threats that Trump and his minions in the Republican Party in Congress are already trying to set this up to have the new Treasury Secretary have the power to go after nonprofits, revoke their nonprofit status, and they want to streamline the process so it wouldn't even really be any kind of a fair process that you could appeal or anything like that. So we need to defeat this. It's HR 9495. Please make a note of that and make sure you contact your representatives tomorrow. We think we can beat it in the Senate if we can't beat it in the House, but it would be better if we defeated it in the House. So if you know people who are feeling sort of distraught or dismayed or don't know what they can do or feel like Trump is all powerful or whatever, here's a very simple but important thing that they can do to call their representative and tell them to vote against this awful bill, because it would hurt New Hampshire Peace Action and National Peace Action, or it could anyway. So that's the good news, I guess. The good news, bad news, that this awful bill is going forward. That our resistance to Trump is already started, already ongoing. Now, two other things that are very important to the work we've all been doing. The UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Works Agency, which has been defunded by the United States. All the other countries have restored funding, and it's absolutely necessary to get UNRWA back in functioning with the terrible humanitarian crisis in Gaza and beyond. So there has been a bill that we've been supporting for a while now in the House, but there hadn't been in the Senate. Just this week, Peter Welch, the Democratic senator from Vermont or West New Hampshire, maybe, I don't know what you guys think of Vermont, he is introducing a bill to restore funding to UNRWA. Now, we don't even know if it will get a vote, and the political machinations against this, especially by the Republicans in Congress will be very difficult to overcome. There is possible that in legislation that has to pass before the end of the year to keep the government open, or the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, it's possible that they could try to get unrefunding back in, but I think that's very unlikely. So I think the task for now is to support the bill in the House, support Welch's new bill in the Senate. So you can ask Senators Shaheen and Hassan to support that. And then probably the fight will have to be next year. And it's an international fight. It's not just here in the United States. And lastly, the big vote that we've been pointing to, really a historic and unique vote, the joint resolutions of disapproval that are being brought forward by Bernie Sanders. And he's getting more and more support now, co-sponsors, but also other senators who are coming out in favor. And this is the first time that weapons transfers from the United States to Israel will actually be voted on in the Senate. There are 6 different weapons systems, and we've been putting out information on this. We have fact sheets and alerts and all that kind of thing. The vote in the Senate is probably also going to be Wednesday. So this is one of these times where everything happens all at once. So the vote on HR 9495 and the vote on these joint resolutions of disapproval probably will both be Wednesday. That can change. Congressional schedules often do, particularly the Senate. But we've been working really diligently on this. We have folks in 27 different states around the country who have been doing coalition sign-on letters to their senators in favor of the JRDs. I know that's been going on in New Hampshire. And Amy was kind enough to invite me to sit in on the meeting last Thursday that we had with Senator Shaheen's staffer. And I thought it was a really good meeting. And what impressed me, and I sit in on a lot of lobby meetings, was the staffer really understood where we were coming from, understood the issues, clearly had spent time and cares about the issues. And I was also impressed. I could tell that there's been strong ongoing communication. This wasn't just out of the blue, we're having this one meeting because this vote's coming up in the next week. Now, don't be fooled or put off by how the vote comes forward. They probably will not vote on all 6 bills. They might only have 2 or 3. They could be voted on separately. They might try to package them. There might be a procedural vote. Not to get too much into the weeds on this, but in the Senate, this type of act, this joint resolution of disapproval to stop weapons sales, has privileged status, so it can't be bottled up in committee. So the fact that Senator Sanders is proposing the vote, it will come forward and get a vote. Now, again, we don't know if it'll be Wednesday for sure, but we think it probably will be. I'm not going to make any kind of bold predictions about how many votes we're going to get. But again, it's historic. It's the first time this is happening, that the Senate is voting on possibly stopping weapons transfers to Israel. And it would send a message to the Israeli government that they don't have blank check support in the United States Congress. Will there be a debate on the JRDs? Yes, but they have to, the managing the floor time. So there will be a vote, and I don't know how long. Typically on something like this, they would probably have at least a couple of hours of debate, but they haven't announced a schedule for that. And typically the Senate schedule only gets announced the day before. So it could be tomorrow. We'll see, oh, they're scheduling the vote at 5 o'clock after 2 hours of debate or whatever it is. So we'll know more about that tomorrow. But I just want to thank everybody for the work that you've been doing on that, and particularly good work in New Hampshire on Senator Shaheen. We also have the opportunity, I was joking about, did Trump already name Elon Musk to be his Treasury Secretary? And I wouldn't actually put that past him. But we will have the opportunity to work against some of the worst appointments that I think, this is just my own opinion, I think Trump is so full of himself, and he's been planning his recrudescence, is that the right word? We don't have to call him the president. We can call him the recrudescent, which is a word that means the return of something awful after a reprieve. So the recrudescent Trump, I think he's a little bit full of himself, and some of these appointments are just horrible. Matt Gaetz for Attorney General, I can't even believe that. And this guy Hegseth, is that his name, for the Department of Defense, and Marco Rubio for Secretary of State. I don't think they're all going to get through. I think some of them are so bad and have some really bad skeletons in their closets. But whether they get through or not, it will mean a lot if we, and by we I mean the broad progressive movement, civil society, stands up and says, no, these guys are unacceptable. Well, women too. Tulsi Gabbard for the Director of National Intelligence. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, that and it'll be very important, especially to Democratic senators. So working against the appointments will be important. And so this is all very near-term work that I'm talking about. Going forward, what will Trump do on nuclear disarmament issues? Will he, use his supposedly great relationship with Putin to restart any kind of arms control, arms reduction talks? Pentagon budget, sometimes he talks about it being too high, but then, sometimes he says he doesn't like the warmongers, and other times he says, well, we need to, keep Lockheed Martin and Raytheon and all their coffers full. Will he start a trade war and maybe ratchet up the tensions with China? Will he try again with his bromance with Kim Jong-un in North Korea? That was so strange. I wouldn't, bet a lot of money on knowing anything about what's going to happen on all these issues. But I don't think that's really our job to sort of try to prognosticate about what Trump might do. I think it's important for us to make sure that we are staying true to our agenda, our priorities, and the things that we want to put forward, regardless of who's the president or who's the Secretary of State or who is the Secretary of Defense. So Peace Action will be working on, and some of you know this already, but we'll be doing conference calls later this year and actually early next year too, to figure out our issue priorities, our campaign priorities. And they probably aren't going to change a whole lot from what they've been, unfortunately. Doesn't seem like we get to check things off of our to-do list very often. We have these crises that linger and these horrible weapons programs that just proliferate. But again, I think, spending time thinking about what Trump might do on this, that, or the other issue is not really our job. Our job is to make sure that we are putting forward our agenda. And the last thing that I wanted to talk about is something a little broader, and again, perhaps speaks to certain people who maybe are not organizers, but they care. They want a better, kinder society, and they don't want the Trump agenda, the MAG agenda, as we might call it. And people need things to do, though, because they otherwise are sort of frozen in their disempowerment. And sometimes I like to talk about this, that fear has both fear has a limiting effect, both physiologically and also metaphorically. If you are fearful, your peripheral vision actually narrows because you have to focus on the what's in a bear coming towards you or whatever it was, right? So your peripheral vision doesn't work. Okay. Same thing metaphorically. If you're gripped by that fear, your thinking, you're looking for allies, looking for how you can be effective, gets narrowed. And there's a lot about isolation in our society right now. And there's a lot of forces that want us to be atomized consumers and not build community and not be in organizations like Peace Action or New Hampshire Peace Action. And that's the only way fascism can win. Or I'm actually call them wannabe fascists. I don't want to give them that much credit yet. I think I'm not even sure Trump understands what fascism is. He tried calling Harris a fascist. Like, what are you talking about? So wannabe fascists can only win if we are defeated by our fear and we limit our vision. And we can't allow that to happen. I know a lot of people, including me sometimes, like their alone time, but there are ways you can be helpful and be active, even if you're not an organizer and you're not getting people together. And um, thinking more broadly, not just the peace and disarmament, anti-war agenda, I think we're going to be very challenged to develop new ways of solidarity, of mutual aid, of protecting people who need protecting. And my shorthand for this is called a blue oasis or blue oases. I don't like the red-blue dichotomy about politics, and red states have all kinds of great people and blue states have all kinds of conservative people, and whatever. But it's a shorthand that people can get right away, that a blue oasis would be someplace where trans children are protected, where our schools and libraries are protected and we're not banning books, where women's right to reproductive health care will be respected, where immigrants are not going to be deported willy-nilly in the middle of the night, and we're going to stand up for those people in our communities. And so even if you're not an organizer, you can think about who are the most vulnerable communities where I live and reach out to them and ask them, what do they need? Do they need help? Do they need volunteers? Do they need advocacy? Do they need money? Whatever it is, because we are going to have to protect ourselves from the MAG agenda. And he didn't use the word blue oasis, but I was thrilled to see my governor, Wes Moore, a pretty progressive African-American governor's first term here in Maryland. The week of the election, he convened his cabinet and basically said, we are going to protect Marylanders from the Trump agenda, from the MAG agenda. Now, he's a politician and he had to say the right things about, well, if there are ways we can work with Trump in Congress, we will. The bridge in Baltimore has to get rebuilt. Well, that's going to have to involve federal money. There's a lot of federal workers in Maryland. And just the federal government is the biggest employer in a lot of states, not just Maryland or Virginia. It's the biggest employer in Illinois. It might be in a whole bunch of states. So Trump and Congress do have a lot of power to threaten cutting down all kinds of programs. A friend of mine is afraid that they're going to lose their job because NIH funding will get cut, and she's part of a university that does really important research. So we're all going to have to be looking at those things both on a policy level, but also on a personal level. Who can we help protect in our communities to show that we care about them and we're not going to let the MAGA agenda take them over? And so Governor Moore here in Maryland, he was actually talking about he and his cabinet, and he used the word stress tested. They've already stress tested a number of ways that they think that the Republicans may try to come after Maryland. One thing you may remember, and this happened during Trump's first term, the sanctuary cities, where cities around the country were saying we are not going to allow ICE and INS to come in here and round people up willy-nilly and throw them back to wherever. That sanctuary cities is a model for what I'm talking about, this idea of a blue oasis or blue oases. And it could be in your community, it could be in your county, in your state, in your city. I think the larger the entity, the better. And it doesn't mean that all society's ills go away, but it means that we are saying here in our state, our city, our county, wherever it is, that we value other humans, we value the environment, and we are going to do whatever we can to protect people from the ravages, not just to people, but also to the earth. So that's a way that I think we can all think about how can we be challenged to think more broadly. It's going to be hard enough on the peace, social justice, anti-war, disarmament agenda, but also protecting our communities from that really harmful agenda. And I think that's something we can all do. And even if you're not an organizer, you can find out who in your community needs help, who's going to be most targeted. So that was my spiel for tonight. And it's not always the kind of spiel that I give, and it's a little broader. But the few people I've talked to about this have liked the idea. And it's very much of a grassroots and democracy building and community building idea. I don't have a blueprint for this, how you do this blue oasis in Concord, in New Hampshire, wherever, right? That's for you to figure out and for people to learn what it means to be in solidarity and in community.
Thank you, Kevin. And we have people ready to ask questions already. And I'm gonna just ask to unmute, and George, you should be able to talk now.
Cool, thank you. I wondered, one of the concerns I had about this concept, Kevin, is replacing federal dollars. And I was talking with a friend of mine who suggested the opposite, that if states threaten to withhold their funding from the federal government, it might be a way to negotiate. And I wondered if that's a possibility. In other words, we in Maryland are not going to turn over X dollars to the federal government because it's, threatening people. Is that something that, some states could do?
I like the idea, but I'm not sure it works that way. I mean, I pay my taxes directly to the federal government. I mean, I also pay state taxes as well, but it's not like the state collects it and then decides not to send it to Washington. I do think we do need to talk to some budget nerds about these kinds of things. And you already have, idiocy of states refusing federal money for mass transit or for high-speed rail or whatever. So you have states that have done this in the wrong way, obviously. So I think we do need to talk to some budget nerds about this, and maybe that is possible, and I'm just not aware of what the mechanism is. But it's not like the governor of Maryland scoops up all the tax dollars from Maryland and then writes a check to DC. So I don't know how that mechanism would work, but I'd love to find out. Maybe there is a way to do that. Now, asking people to withhold their own taxes, like war tax resistance, like probably some of you have done, that's a totally valid and very difficult and potentially risky choice. But so there are different ways to look at this, and so I'm glad you and I have talked about this, and a few other people have too. And I like let's stimulate broad thinking about how those funding questions could work.
Great. Kevin, I wanted just to note that David has an idea that we could call them oases of care instead of blue oases. And maybe part of what you're suggesting, as I'm understanding it, is things that go around the government, ways we directly help each other. Is that kind of what you're thinking about?
Well, I like oases of care. The thing about, okay, not to wordsmith this a lot, I like to be succinct if I possibly can. And Blue Oasis does have a political demand to it. It says to Democratic politicians, get a spine. It's not just a mutual aid and a solidarity on a personal level, which I'm all for, and I'm proposing that. But it also means people like Governor Moore and my senators have to stand up to the MAG agenda. So if you say Blue Oasis, there is an implicit, well, I would say it's an explicit political demand. But in your community, if you'd rather call it oases of care, and you are focused more on the interpersonal, I want both. I want the interpersonal protection and care and solidarity and mutual aid for people that are going to be targeted, but I also want the blue team, the Democrats, to know that they have a job to do. Arnie, your point's a good one about the threat to mobilize the National Guard. So that's where governors would have to stand up and say, no, you can't do that. Now, I heard something very troubling to me. I live in Silver Spring, Maryland, stone's throw from Washington, D.C. Because of Washington's limited home rule, Congress still can pretty much treat the District of Columbia as its own little fiefdom. And Trump, or any president actually, could mobilize the National Guard in DC without the mayor's approval. So that is something that could be very dangerous if we're having large protests in Washington, for example. I think, well, and of course on January 6th, this happened in reverse because Trump could or should have called out National Guard to stop, the insurrection, and didn't do it, or took his sweet time doing it. So, but that's another aspect to this. you might need to have conversations not just with governors or mayors, but also police chiefs or National Guards people and say, we expect you to ignore unlawful orders that come from the White House. So there's all kinds of levels of how this mass disobedience, if you want to call it that, or mass love, if you want to call it that, or mass care for each other. There's all different levels of how this could work.
Thanks, Kevin. Bill is asking, what, if anything, is Peace Action going to do about the lame duck Biden administration's new missile attacks on Russia?
I don't think that question is phrased correctly. The Biden administration is not attacking Russia. It has given approval for Ukraine to use certain long-range weapons to attack Russia. That's what is going on. It's not, the United States is not attacking Russia directly.
And is that on the Peace Action agenda to do, to address?
To tell you the truth, I know it's been in the news a little bit, and I know that I think it was just announced the last day or two, and I have to admit I have not been able to focus on that. I've been focused on Gaza 24/7, 365, pretty much.
Okay, so maybe some info coming, but not yet.
I don't want to make up an answer for you. If I had an answer for you, I'd give you one. I don't.
Okay. Moji, I'm going to let you unmute. Go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Kevin. This is Moji Aga.
Whoa.
And I have an invitation for you, by the way, to be a speaker for my latest effort called Peace-Seeking Iranian Veterans. And I would love to have, you as a guest, as a special guest in early 2025. And as you remember, you were going to be a guest on Iranian nonviolence, but then that got canceled last year because of internal Iran issues. And the internal Iran issues before and after the 1979 revolution give me a little bit of experience, unpleasant experience, but it's not, this is not as shocking to me as to a lot of other people in this country. And because I've seen repression before and after the revolution, and one of the places that the regimes, which the Trump regime is going to be even a more regime than before, is to go after civil society. And the civil society is vulnerable. Civil society organizations are very vulnerable right now, and they are vulnerable in the sense that they don't have the funding or the muscle, or of course they don't have any muscle because they're nonviolent, but civil society is something that I believe that the regime is going to go after, and the appointments that we've seen so far is to show that they mean business. So I want your thoughts about the level of danger that civil society organizations, and of course at the bottom, the most vulnerable among them are the Palestinian ones and the Muslim ones, and the ones that have least amount of bandwidth. And so my question is for your thoughts on this. And also, we need, as you pointed out, and when you were saying we need to have mutual aid and other ways of people helping each other, this is what I've been working on, as you know, in chambers of compassion, in contrast with chambers of commerce. So anyhow, I am, this is my formal invitation in public for you to be a special speaker for peace-seeking Iranian nonviolence. And we already had our first binational, bilingual town hall just this past Friday. And our guest was the president of the VFP, Veterans for Peace chapter in Tucson.
Thank you, Moji.
Thank you, and I hope you accept my invitation. I'll send it to you in text or in chat, as they call it here.
Go ahead, Kevin.
Well, I appreciate all of that, and I like chambers of compassion. I like that a lot. And yeah, that's why I started off saying that the resistance to Trump is already happening with this bill, HR 9495, that we need to defeat this week, and also to work against these appointments. In terms of the JRDs, the Joint Resolutions of Disapproval, I don't know that that will have much of an impact on what in the world Trump's policy will be towards Israel and Palestine. You know, if you look back at the, well, first of all, I think the first or second person that called to congratulate Trump was Netanyahu. I mean, Netanyahu is doing jumping jacks that his pal Trump is back in the White House. I don't know, you know, basically under Trump, U.S. Middle East policy was pretty much subcontracted out to Israel and Saudi Arabia. So I don't know that the JRD vote will make a difference. But again, you can look at any of this as the resistance to Trump has already started.
Kevin, I want to follow up on that quickly. I've been thinking myself, how should we, you know, given that legislative avenues for helping end the genocide are going to be harder, what is on the agenda? You know, is BDS more a good idea? Do we need more nonviolent direct action? Do you have thoughts about where we do go to try to work on this? We can't just wait 4 years.
No, and of course, those are all in the activist toolbox, and some have been utilizing them. The legislative process is just so incredibly frustrating. On the other hand, we can't let Congress off the hook. So it's, and I think people have to make decisions about what they think, you know, their best strategies are. The BDS movement, which of course has been around for a long time, I think has even picked up some more high-profile actions and targets during this horrible genocide. So I think, yeah, that's all fair game. And in terms of nonviolent direct action, I'm aware of at least some people are thinking about such acts of conscience this week. I can't really say more than that, but and good for them.
Great. Well, some in New Hampshire were part of the whole Mother's Day 5 situation, and hope that that was inspiring. So we can do more of that. And Karishma, I'm going to let you unmute. Go ahead. There you go.
Thank you. I'm new to the peace action, and so as a new person, it feels sometimes very frustrating that you want to help, but there's so many roadblocks, and even trying to make people understand that this is about life, somebody's life. It just always feels so. People who are good people don't even want to hear this. There's just so much marketing against the Palestinians, so much dehumanization. So for someone like me, who sometimes feels disheartened, and what would you say? This is number one. Number two, the Smotrich and Ben Gvir have these amazing, horrible plans for that Middle East, and they want to just continue their land grab. And Mike Huckabee, who's also a renowned Christian nationalist, will also use his evangelical perspective to support them. And of course, Trump will give them carte blanche. So what do you say when I feel it's not a fight that we will be able to win?
Well, I've been doing this work for almost 40 years, and I feel like that a lot. But I never let it stop me from doing what I need to do. And that's what the powers that be, the war machine, that's what they want. They want us to give up. They want us to be demoralized. So I like to look at this in two different ways. How can I act that feels like it's important and effective and that I'm doing something? But also, how can I do that in communion with other people? Because that's, again, what they want is isolation and despair. And that's how they win. And that's why being part of organizations is really important. And I know some people are more sociable than others. Some people are organizers, some people aren't. But I totally resonate with that. I wake up every day racking my brain on how we can be more effective. And sometimes I come up empty. And that hurts. And I've been doing this a long time. But I never let it stop me from doing what I know is right. And especially at this time where you have this horrible racism where, the Washington political elite just doesn't even see Palestinians as human beings. It's just so horrible. And yes, very frustrating. But I don't think you can give in to that. And if you give in to that, then go do something else. If you're more into women's issues or environmental issues or whatever it is. But I think we can't give up. I think we can't give in to that dismay. And in terms of your second question, which is a very good one, I think we have to expose this for the land grab that it is. And Trump, the real estate guy, I'm sure he wants to put up all kinds of big hotels right on the beach in Gaza City, right? And I am very nervous about what he is going to be cooking up with Netanyahu. He said very little. I mean, he doesn't say much of anything that makes any sense on any issue. And, he didn't really have many policy proposals. But when he says, well, I want Israel to finish the job, what in the world does that mean? Kill another 20, 30,000 people, take over all the land, annex the West Bank? I mean, what in the world does that mean? So I think we have to expose the criminality here, both in terms of Israel and in terms of whatever Trump cooks up.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, how to keep engaged. Did you read that Rebecca Solnit piece that went around, Kevin?
I did. She's very good. I think there's some other good ones that I've been reading, but yeah, I do think that people have to. Also, somebody today sent me something about seeing darkness as a womb, not a tomb. And also this time of year, some people talk about embracing the fertile darkness. It is a dark time. There's no question about that. So I do think we need community, we need solidarity, we need love, and we need reasons to put one foot in front of the other every day.
I thought it was helpful to be reminded that for all that's going wrong, there are people who've been in far worse situations and managed to turn things around. We are doing a whole series through this Monday night series on nonviolent direct action, how it's been used, how it can be used. David here is helping with that, and we're going to keep that going. There was a question in the chat about the media. Now it moved, someone else wrote, but here we go. Do you have ideas as to how to deal with the right-wing media? The loss of a free press is very troubling.
Well, there are a lot of so-called alternative media now springing up that are gaining more viewership and readership. And I think that is to be commended. And some of them actually have a nonprofit model. And so they could be vulnerable under this HR 9495. So I've always thought, as activists, we need a two-track strategy. We need to try to influence the mainstream media, knowing that there's cracks where you can get in, I've been really surprised that the Union Leader, which is one of the most conservative historically papers, has been open to anti-war voices. And so that's people not giving up. And letters to the editor, you might have a much better chance to get in there than you might have news coverage. So I think you have to work your way into where you can influence and get your message out in the mainstream media. But we also need to be our own media and uphold and support our own alternative, including nonprofit media models.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, we've had an amazing luck with the Union Leader the last couple of years.
I don't think that's luck. I think it's persistence.
Okay, good point. Well, let me also say we've also been, New Hampshire has been generating a lot of awesome letters to the editor and op-eds. And we're also, Peace Action is happy to help you if you want to get involved in that. We've been offering editing help and connections and coaching so that people can really use that tool that we have. I'm going to let Chris ask the next question. Chris, did that work? Can you unmute? Yeah. Chris, we can't hear you. Maybe you'll need to write something in the chat. I don't know why. But we can't hear you. Okay, I'm going to see, we have another hand up. Is it Quanta? I'm sorry if I'm not saying your name right, but I'm going to let you unmute. Go ahead. Did that work? Oh, there you go.
Now it worked. Thank you. This is more of a long-term suggestion. There is a question about what are we going to do so that we can bring people from both parties together who are willing to look at things objectively and create a dialogue, civil dialogue, and build bridges, because there is a perception. I'm involved in Braver Angels at some level, and I really would recommend that people reach out. At least, if you go on braverangels.org or .com, they have several things that you can do online. But I do think we have to start that process so that there's a misperception of one another. We have to come together, and I just wanted to bring that to your attention. At least there is an organization that can help us. Thank you very much.
I love that. I love that. And certainly as a peacemaker, I want to believe that, but I also would counsel against people expecting too much or not knowing what the energy and time commitment would be of arguing with people, or you're not trying to argue. I don't know. For me, I'm an organizer. I'm not really trying to convince people that I'm right. I'm trying to organize the people who understand what it is. And I'm not against trying to get people to come together and understand each other. I certainly am. But if you're trying to take away the human rights of women, I don't really have anything to talk to you about. I don't. There have been some common ground discussions about abortion, et cetera, et cetera. But that's not where I'm putting my energy. And that's just speaking for me.
Braver Angels has done some really interesting work, and there is a group in New Hampshire now for people who are wondering about that. We did have them speak not too long ago. Some of our members are involved in that. The idea not being to convince anyone so much as to not want to kill each other, or not hate each other, I guess is how they talk about it. So that is another model. I wanted to actually, though, kind of build on that. Lily sent something out through the Peace Action affiliates today, Kevin, about some legislation around, I think, Pentagon bloat that Republicans are bringing forward. And this is an interesting, in New Hampshire, we have the Protect the Guard possibility, something that would make it harder to deploy the Guard, at least the National Guard outside of the US. there are some places in which Republicans are working on things that maybe we can work with them on. What do you think of that?
Well, in that bill, which is just introduced, it was actually Elizabeth Warren who's the main sponsor, but then the other three co-sponsors are Republican. To me, color me skeptical until I see the rubber meets the road. What programs do they want to cut in the Pentagon? Are they going to cut any programs in their own states? Sometimes even liberal or progressive members of Congress don't want to cut programs if they're based in their states or if they have workers who are dependent. And it's something I know that folks deal with, especially around New Hampshire and Maine with submarine bases, the naval bases, and the naval contractors. But yeah, it is an inevitability because the Pentagon budget is going to cannibalize not only itself, but the rest of the budget. So right now, if you look at the discretionary budget that Congress votes on every year, it's way more than half Pentagon spending at this point. And they're not going to be able to fund everything in there, including a lot of these ridiculously expensive nuclear weapon systems and F-35, et cetera. So there could be openings, but I've been hearing that for 10 years and we're not making progress. So let's hope this is different, but we've been hearing for more than 10 years. We've been hearing since the end of the Cold War, we've been hearing. I'm sorry, so somebody was saying they didn't understand about going after nonprofits. Again, what this bill would do, it would empower the Treasury Secretary, and of course the new Treasury Secretary will be under Trump, will be appointed by Trump, to go after the nonprofit tax status of anybody that they think is a political opponent. And they trump it up, and I'm using that pun intentionally, they trump it up saying that it's about anti-terrorism, but that's nonsense. The government has already all the tools it needs to go after anybody who's supporting or funding terrorism. This is a political witch hunt. It's McCarthyism, whatever you want to call it. And I shouldn't say witch hunt. I don't mean to be. Anyway, sorry.
Thanks, Kevin. And I will say that part of the problem is how many Democrats are voting for it. And here in New Hampshire, one of our Dems did vote for it, Chris Pappas. So we're asking people to call and ask them why and will he change his mind. We don't have a lot of time, but time left here, and there are still things in the chat. Let me just ask this one, because a few people put this out there that, essentially, how can the international community help? If the US is not going to do anything about Israel's behavior, what can the international community do? And I'm not sure you have an answer for that, Kevin, but do you have any thoughts?
Well, Israel is already extremely isolated in the international community. I don't know if you saw, and this is an unusual example, but last week, Israel was playing a soccer match against France in the national stadium just outside of Paris, where I've actually been to see a match. I happened to be there for a conference, and the United States was playing France, and I went to it. It's where they just had the Olympics. It was the main stadium in Paris for the Olympics. Only about 20,000 people showed up to the game. Normally that stadium would be packed. It's an 80,000 seat stadium. It was the smallest attendance ever for a French national team game. And somebody said the protest that was in Paris about what's going on in Gaza was actually bigger. Like there were more people at the protest than there were at the soccer match. So that's just one example, okay, that I'm talking about in terms of Israel's isolation. In terms of the ICC and the ICJ, I think those are very, very important. And Israel knows that basically it's protected by the United States at the UN or in other international bodies. But to me, I like to turn the question around. I just don't think this is sustainable. I don't think Israel can impose an apartheid reality, and some South Africans have said the apartheid that Palestinians face is worse than what Black South Africans faced. I just don't think it's sustainable. And so I try to talk to people, and they don't have an answer. So if you're pro-Israel, pro-Zionist, whatever you want to call it, and you're saying, well, Israel needs to protect itself and we need weapons, blah, blah, blah. I always ask them, well, what's your solution? Do you have a solution? Is this just going to go on forever? that Israel is going to impose this apartheid system with unlimited US support and unlimited tax dollars forever? The answer is no, and they don't have a solution. They do not have a solution. So I think that we have to raise a lot of questions. It's not that we have to have all the answers all the time, because we certainly don't. And I don't think the United Nations or the ICJ or the ICC are unimportant. I think they are important, and they set out rules and norms and laws that everyone should be following. And everyone knows Israel's not following it. Now, that doesn't mean they can make Israel stop tomorrow, but I do think international institutions are important.
Thanks, Kevin. And I need to wrap up here. I have some things to tell you all, and Kevin and I have another meeting in 15 minutes. So let me first put in the chat the National Peace Action website so you can follow what's going on, what Kevin and others are doing at that level. And here's some other programming for those in the New Hampshire area. Did that go through? Yes. So we want you to stay in touch with us. NHPeaceAction.org. We're also on Facebook. You can learn about what we're working on and what programming we have coming up. But let me give you some previews here. Our upcoming CeaseFire Now vigil schedule for the week is, well, a little more than that, Wednesday, November 20th, 2 to 3 p.m. at Rep. Pappas's office in Dover, 660 Central Ave. Thursday, November 21st, from noon to 1, vigilers will be at City Plaza, Concord, New Hampshire. Then the following Wednesday, November 27th, 2 to 3 p.m., we will be at Senator Shaheen's office, 340 Central Ave, Dover. Maybe with a big thank you card if she votes for the JRDs. We shall see. Beyond the vigils, I want you to know tomorrow night, right? Yeah. Tuesday, November 19th at 6:30 p.m., the film Israelism will be shown at 3S Art Space in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, followed by discussion. A week from today, Monday, November 25th, we have a special Monday night program, 7 to 8:30 Eastern Time. Moving forward, post-election plans for New Hampshire activists. We're going to gather to explore ways that we can act here in New Hampshire. And we're going to talk about peace and then probably immigration, climate, maybe labor, LGBTQ issues, and more. Arnie Alpert and David Blair and some other local organizers will join for that. It won't be recorded so that people can really feel free to talk and get into things. So we hope you'll join us for that. Also know there's an action being planned for Tuesday, November 26th, a vigil and a fast for Gaza in Manchester, likely outside of Chris Pappas's office there. There'll be more info posted by Peace Action, New Hampshire Peace Action, when available. Also, you can contact NHVFP, that's New Hampshire Veterans for Peace, at comcast.net to get on the list for more. And then let me just tell you, our next online peace and justice conversation will be Monday, December 2nd at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The topic is how we ended the U.S.-Saudi war on Yemen with Isaac Evans France and Neda Salah from Action Corps. Very, very inspiring. Awesome folks doing great work. Please join us for that. And know that this series is free, but we always welcome your donations and your support. NHPeaceAction.org/donate is where you can go to do that. With all that said, I just really want to thank you all for being here, continuing to show up. We do understand there's a lot of demoralized folks out there, and it's not going to be easy, but like Kevin said, we're in it together, and supporting each other and moving forward is just so important. So we'll be here for you, and we're glad when you show up and join us. Kevin, do you want to say anything?
No, just to say thank you for all that you do there in New Hampshire, and seeing so many friends from other states on the Zoom tonight too. Very good, and I really appreciate all your work for Peace Action and for trying to build a more sane world.
And now let's thank Kevin for joining us. We're so pleased to hear from you. We really, really appreciate it. And we'll, I'm sure we'll have you back.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Kevin. Thanks, everyone. Good night.